All right, good afternoon. We are going to start with the afternoon agenda. Hopefully everybody enjoyed their lunch. We have the Life Expectancy Art and Science panel next. As you can imagine, the actuaries were all sitting here at 1 o'clock wondering what was going on and where everybody was. So they are by the book, by the numbers. We're going to get into the details of life expectancy underwriting. Before that, I just wanted to take a minute and explain what it is that they do that's important to the industry and the asset managers. So life expectancy companies, one of their primary ways that they interact with the life settlement industry is they create life expectancy reports that we utilize for valuation and interpretation of the underlying lives that we buy. So in a life settlement transaction, there are three main variables in determining what these things are worth. There is the premium payments that the individual pays throughout their life, which tend to increase, and they increase exponentially over time as the individuals get older. There is the death benefit, which is a fixed amount typically. We just don't know when we're going to get that fixed amount. So what the life expectancy providers give us is data that is based on probability that can tell us when those cash flows may or may not come in. And the initial part of the panel, we're going to focus on what those reports are and how we use them. But before that, we'll start off with introductions, and we'll start off with Vince. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your firm, and maybe a little bit about your background.
Sure. My name is Vince Graneri. I am an actuary by training, and I'm going to apologize to these poor people behind me because my body's not as young as it used to be, so it doesn't twist like it used to, but just know that you're seeing my best side anyway. So an actuary by training, Harvard MBA, been involved with building the kind of policies that Rich and the folks are buying and selling, giving you your return for about 25 years. Then I got into life settlements around 2006 and life expectancies soon after that, and started my own firm in 2013. So we've analyzed probably close to 500,000 insured lives within the life settlements business, which we think is really important because the life settlement portion of the population is much different than either a life insured population or the general population. We believe in a number of things. We believe in using data. We believe that it's very important to keep the mortality table and the underwriting process linked. They're inextricable because the base table can be different amongst companies, but as long as they're looking at the entire risk, which is the basic healthy risk plus what's happened to them with the underwriting in terms of their health, then I think you get the full picture of the insured's health. And we've got to do a lot of research to keep up to date with things. When I first started in this business, multiple myeloma was a death sentence. Leukemia was just about a death sentence. And now we have people that are living 20 years with multiple myeloma or more, and we have people with leukemia who actually survived that, and it's turned into a chronic condition.
Thank you so much. I am Rahul Navandar. I work for Fasano Associates as one of their medical directors. Since morning, I have heard several people, saying they have 20 years and 30 years of experience in the life settlement. So I'm a newbie, only a year, maybe more than a year experience in the life settlement industry. But prior to this, I was in the life insurance industry for almost 20 years. I just want to talk briefly about Fasano Associates. Maybe you could go one slide back. Yeah. So Fasano Associates has a unique approach towards life expectancy, providing the life expectancy estimates. We are a team of 18 physician medical directors. Our combined experience is more than 555 years of the clinical plus insurance medicine experience. Our physicians come from different backgrounds in pulmonology, cardiology, toxicology, nuclear medicine, internal medicine, as well as emergency medicine. And just talking about our philosophy, while we think it's very important to have a retrospective look, which we can get through different data, and definitely our own internal data, the MDs at Fasano bring a very unique perspective on a prospective outlook. Most of these MDs are in their clinical medicine as well as insurance medicine. They remain abreast of different new research, new treatments. And I think we bring that prospective outlook while we are providing the life expectancy estimates to our clients. Just briefly about our process. At Fasano, the MDs don't underwrite based on the abstract or summaries, but they underwrite directly from the entire case. All medical records are reviewed by the medical directors. We have a very strong peer review process. There is a peer review round 1, there's a peer review round 2, which is all, again, the entire medical directors team. Finally, we have a reconciliation process, which is mostly like an arbitrage, which is not by an MD, but someone who is very much experienced in the life settlement industry. So that's pretty much about us.
Thank you.
Hello, I am Dr. Manitipa Chetia, and I am a medical graduate, and I have been practicing before joining underwriting, I think back in 2002. So prior to joining underwriting, I was practicing as a medical doctor. And since 2002, I have been underwriting life settlement, not life settlement, traditional life, and then shifted to life settlement when I was with AIG in 2008, and then finally joined Longevity Services in 2016. And since then, I am been with the company, and I have seen changes that has happened over the time of inception of Longevity Services and the time that we are here today, proudly with a huge underwriting team. We have around 10 full-time underwriting abstractors, which are, they are all registered nurses, and they have AVS background doing medical extraction. And then we have a team of 5 medical underwriters. 2 of them are medical doctors, one including me, and the one other who has joined us from AVS again. And our underwriting team, I would say, is very experienced from their past work experiences in companies, especially AVS and AIG. What else do I say? If I say about our process, it's very simple. We receive an application. It's entered into our fulfillment system. And this case is then goes through a process of quality check for date of birth, sex, socials, and then they keep a track. We have a quality manager who takes care of all these stuff, basic nuances. Then this case gets, the medical records get updated into the system, and then these are being then extracted by our experienced medical nurses and prepared for the underwriter to review and take a look at that. So the underwriting process also has multiple steps. They are first done by the underwriters. They make a decision, and they have certain limits up till which they can process the case. And then above that particular process, they go to a director, medical director, or to the or ultimately it comes to me if it is a kind of a complex case. And we do have a kind of a team meeting on certain cases where we need the input from all the experienced people on board. And finally, we arrive at a consensus. And these are all based on medical researches that we do on the particular case condition. And yeah, finally, it's made ready for delivery to the customer. I think that is all from me.
There is one fun fact. I and Monideepa used to work for the same employer or a company back in India.
Yes, we did.
Small world.
Yes.
Mike?
My name is Mike Gravis. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of ISC Services. I have an engineering background by training. I've been in the life insurance business for 25 years and have been involved in the life settlement industry since 2007. ISC was founded in 2005, so we have about 20 years of operating history and duration. We use a classical insurance underwriting approach similar to that of life insurance companies. We employ the same table and rating kind of methodology in increments and employ flat extras similar to that of life insurance companies. We can get into specific processes perhaps later in the discussion, but that's basically ISC.
Thank you, Mike. And just as a refresher to the crowd, the traditional life insurance underwriting process tends to be a credit and a debit system. So when somebody goes to take out a life insurance policy for the first time and the life insurance company does the underwriting, they'll look at all the positive attributes of that individual, maybe longevity in the family, maybe that they're fit, they have a good BMI, and then they'll take a look at the unfavorable characteristics. Maybe they're on a prescription, maybe they have some conditions, and those are the credits and then the debits. And then I'll let the actuaries talk about this a little bit better. Then they apply that debit and credit system through what's called the mortality multiplier on the curve. And we're going to talk about the curve because that is kind of the the secret sauce to this space, right? And there's a lot of actuarial jokes around that. But why don't we get into a little bit more about the inputs that you utilize to determine what that mortality curve is, and then the outputs, which is the report that we get, and maybe a little bit about how your firm differentiates itself in either approach or in process or output. And I'll start with Vinny.
Well, as an actuary, I need to make a slight correction here. You called us all actuaries. There's really only one actuary, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but these are all eminently qualified folks, but really only one actuary here. And anyway, what does that matter? But yeah, the inputs that we get are generally medical records. We try to have at least 3 years of medical records. We'd like to have more, but 3 years is what we'd like to see. We'd like to see the most current medical records as well, although we have some adjustments we can make if the medical records are a little older than what we'd like. And from there, again, we're in a traditional sense, and I think you're going to see a broad spectrum here. Some folks are more involved with sort of data-driven. One of our competitors who's not here is completely data-driven. Then we have other folks that are more subjective, and I think we sort of run the gamut as a panel. We sit closer to the data-driven group. We use our statistical analysis to develop an underwriting manual that says, okay, if the person has a certain condition, let's say they've had a heart attack, what does that do to their health relative to a healthy person who hasn't had a heart attack? And let's just, for the sake of argument, say that that person with a heart attack has a 25% greater chance of dying, and that would give a multiplier of 1.25. And so we're going through the medical records and looking, and our underwriter's job is to identify the conditions based on the manual that is based on the data and the analysis, and come up with an overall multiplier. And we've ticked off all the conditions, and then we also have our base mortality table. And what we do there is we start with population mortality, and we sort of trace it through what's happened to the particular individual. First of all, we know that they've bought a life insurance policy. And we know the difference between life-insured mortality and population mortality, and that's a very important thing to consider. As I said, some folks not here on the panel use population mortality. We don't agree with that. So we're going to take the steps. They've gotten a life policy, so we know what that's done to their mortality. They've also got certain impairments. We know what that's done to the risk of their mortality. And finally, we've also look at other aspects of their risk, and the base mortality table being starting with and I'm having a senior moment here, but so we have our underwriters come up with the conditions. We have assignments to those conditions. We apply that to a base mortality table, and the last thing I was looking at is mortality improvement. There has been mortality improvement in our space over time. So the aspect of selling a policy makes your mortality different than if you just had a life insurance policy. So those are all the different things that happen, and we trace that through. And then at the very end, we put that all together and say, under the best of circumstances, how long is this person going to live? And that's where the human element comes back in. So that's our process. It's data-driven, but we add a human element right at the end, because we feel that there's a big difference between somebody who has high cholesterol at, say, 250 and somebody who has high cholesterol at 210 or 205. Those two things are different, and that's what our data says, and that's why we follow the data.
Thank you.
So this panel was to discuss about the science and art about the life expectancy, and Vince has very well put out the science out there. And maybe I and Monideepa would add some art to it. So Vince gave a very good example, like, when you see someone with a heart attack, then you apply a mortality multiplier. And then what's the role of an underwriter if there was just simply to multiply that, put that multiplier out there? So once we get the same person with heart attack, as an underwriters, we try to put them into some appropriate risk buckets. So let's say someone has a 3-vessel heart disease, where all of his 3 vessels are clogged. He might experience a different mortality compared to someone who has a very mild, non-obstructive coronary artery disease, or where only 1 vessel is impacted. When you specifically focus on the life settlement, or the applicants who come for the life settlement, these are all elderly people, most of them. And you'd see that you also want to assess their functional limitations with this. You very commonly see within your family members, or within your friends, or within anyone, that someone who has the same number of ejection fraction, which is like how much the heart pumps the blood. It could range from 40% to 70%. And people with 40% could also have a same functional capacity. They could walk for 2 miles, and the person who has 65% could also walk for the same 2 miles. So as an underwriter, our art is to assess, yes, what they have baseline as a disorder, what is the severity of their disorder, and then what is their functional limitation as of today, which could drive their life expectancy.
Continuing to what Rahul has just said, the condition might be as simple as a coronary artery disease that we encounter almost like 80–90% of our cases. But how you approach that particular condition is a different ball game, I would say. Just like Rahul said, 1 coronary artery disease versus 3 coronary artery disease is one aspect of looking at it. The other could be how young or old is the person that has a single vessel disease or a 3-vessel disease. What are the comorbid factors or conditions that the person is carrying? He could have a diabetes with him. He could have other, like a BMI, obesity. What his disease burden load that he carries with him, along with the coronary artery disease. There are other stuff that we do definitely look into, like the family history. Is there any history of early deaths in the family related to coronary artery disease? Or is there anything It could be as simple as non-compliance. Is he compliant with the medical directions? Is he taking his medications properly as been directed? Is he following up with his cardiologist that he should be? So these are the other stuff that we do look into. It's not just disease specific, that how many vessels, what procedures he might have undergone or undertaken, but other factors. These are what we call as frailty or fitness factors that we, look at a case when it comes to us as a package, and then we have to decipher as how healthy or not healthy he is, living apart the coronary artery disease condition.
So I think that much of the art of what we do, from my perspective, a lot of it, if you look back over the evolution of the business, a lot of the art has been developing the processes and procedures that we use and that have been used by the insurance business for the last 175 years to a cohort of the population that is uninsurable. Insurance companies, in 2004 and 5 did not issue life insurance products primarily in the primary markets to impaired individuals that are 75 and 80 years old. So a lot of the art has been adapting and developing manuals, building technology and algorithms to account for, sectors of the population where data needs to be manipulated. It wasn't necessarily applicable for the activity in which we're participating. And so there's been certainly a sophistication in kind of what we've done over the last 20 years. And so while there's plenty of science to apply to all of this, there's plenty of medical research out there. The access to information has improved over time. There's been a tremendous amount of art in molding this approach to develop a reliable and consistent, assessment that each of, these firms employs.
Mike, that's really a good point. The underwriter in the life insurance company, when they come up with a condition that's serious, somebody's had a heart attack, somebody's got some COPD or pulmonary, they just reject the case and that goes away. We are charged with coming up with a life expectancy and figuring out how long that person's going to live with that combination of conditions. And so, as Mike was saying, we rely on the data, we rely on research, but sometimes people ask, why do you look at things so differently? That's one of the reasons is that we're into some uncharted territory to a certain degree. Now, the benefit of being here today versus being here 15, 20 years ago is we have learned an awful lot. In 2004, everybody thought, hey, these are life insurance policies, so they should behave like life insurance mortality. That should be the base mortality table. And we started down that path, and we learned that is not true. This is a very, very specialized and small segment of life insurance policies, and it doesn't behave anywhere near the same way. These folks that are selling their policies understand their health very, very well. They wouldn't be selling their policy, their $1 million policy, for $500,000 if they thought they were going to die tomorrow. So we've found a way, and we've done it in different ways, to try and assess what is that risk and how do you best account for it in your life expectancy.
I would just add to that. It's basically, I like to say it is like my way of making people understand what we do. Basically, we pick up cases or we get cases to underwrite where traditional underwriters would have postponed or declined to a certain period of time. So we pick up those cases, relook into the records, and see what we can offer and understand their condition. And we did, when the life settlement industry started, we did have to formulate a new manual, new guideline for these group of people that we underwrite today, yeah.
So next question before we get into the trends. So if I ordered a life expectancy report from each one of you, I'm going to get a report with a life expectancy curve, right? And that gives me the probability of death in any given month over a period of time. Sometimes I could order on one individual a report from each one of you, and those curves look very similar. Other times, they look very different. So, so why is that, and what are asset managers like us to do with that information?
I think we all, different life expectancy providers want to remain in the business. So I always make a call to Monideepa and say, I am issuing 120 months. How much are you issuing? Can you change that?
We just made a joke out of it. Yes, we would. I guess everybody has a different philosophy that goes into play when they start underwriting a case or looking at the case. Their perspectives might be a little different from each other, and how they look at the cases or the condition could be a little different. But I would just certainly like to put forward that I would not like to say anybody is wrong or right. It's just that everybody has a different perspective, different experience, and maybe a different actuarial table or calculator that I would say that comes into play when we arrive at different numbers in the life expectancy.
Yeah, that's very true. So, couple of companies, or not couple of, many people, many companies who might be using some kind of OCR technologies to read some of the abstracts. Sometimes they would get a lot of false positives, and if we were to deploy some kind of artificial engine to that one or artificial intelligence to that one, there could be varied results because of those false positives. And some of the life expectancy providers might want to stick to the old traditional method of actually going through the records and looking at it. So it could be how the company's position is, what they want to do. The second point, which was very important, Vince alluded to it, the base mortality table assumptions. And because everyone collected different pool of cases, reviewed it differently, there was no single table to start with, correct, Vince? So everyone modified it based on their experience. And I think those base mortality assumptions definitely play a role when you come up with your curve. And as you pointed out, this is a very, very different population who has some kind of anti-selection within it, because he did mention that selling $1 million policy for $500,000, they know their health. Someone has to account for that. So maybe those assumptions set to make it different. The third point I wanted to make was where you have complex cases, they could go through different rounds of peer review process. It could be anyone, it could be their medical doctors or senior underwriters with a lot of experience. And that brings a different prospective outlook. As you may go to a medical doctor for a second opinion, and they could have a different opinion, someone could have a different prospective outlook on that case itself. Maybe someone attended a conference, they had an outlook on the medications, what are the new treatment for this type of cancer or this type of disease, and they might want to bring that to the perspective and say, hey, while you might expect the LE on a retrospective data to be this, but if I put the prospective outlook, it might be different.
So one of the things that we've done, and it's worked for us, is sometimes when we have questions, we will call the underwriters and ask them what their thought process was, and we'll let them know that, hey, maybe we got a different approach. And then some of the response that we've got is they've maybe expanded or gone a little bit deeper. Do you find that that's a process that working with the managers and LE providers that can increase accuracy? Sometimes there could be just something as simple as a data input error or missing medical records and those types of things.
I mean, our experience has shown that our clients find that to be helpful, that kind of feedback and interaction. Occasionally there may be we think you overlooked this, and we'll take a look, and perhaps that's the case, but a lot of times it's really explaining our thought process and our view behind what we saw and why we saw it. Our assessments or reports, we've tried to be extremely thoughtful about the information that we provide to kind of answer all those questions. So not only do we try to give our clients a sense of the impairments that we think, are primary, secondary impairments and are causing excess mortality, but we also try to point out impairments that the insured life has or is living with that we don't feel has an effect on excess mortality, and that quite often is probably the impetus for most of the calls that we used to receive are really, did you see this, did you see that? And my personal perspective, and a lot of it also has been developed through feedback with clients, is we don't need to just resuscitate a list of the medical records. They have the medical records already, so we don't need to resuscitate. It's really trying to give them insight into what things are the most impactful and not. So we try to take that feedback and put it into our reports, but we still get calls on a regular basis. We try to provide that feedback to the clients and give them a sense of what's going on. There's not always an agreement, but at least they have a better sense of the foundations that support at least our opinion on that assessment.
All right, well, let's do a quick survey. So raise your hand if you think high cholesterol means you're going to die sooner. Anybody think? Come on, don't be shy. No, we don't have too many. But, okay, in reality, if you have high cholesterol, you're likely to be taking a statin. So in virtually every population that I've looked at in the last 15 or 20 years, high cholesterol, and knowing you have high cholesterol, I guess I should have made the question a little better. I'm obviously not a teacher, and that's not. So if you know you have high cholesterol, that's a good thing, because then you'll get it fixed, you'll get a statin. If you don't know you have high cholesterol, then you have a higher probability of dying. But most people who have high cholesterol find out when. You go to the doctor, you take a test, and they tell you have high cholesterol. So when we see high cholesterol as a condition, and the reason I bring this up in this context is because people will call us and say, wait a minute, why do you have that as a credit? Well, as long as you can tolerate the statin, statins are a wonder drug. They are so protective in every population I've studied, except for ages 92 and above. Once you get that old, then nothing will kill you, I think, is probably the truth. But so that's some of the things are, the data says things to us that are different than people's perceptions would be. So we get a call on that. And then we talked about some other things, inputs, do you have the same records? We had an interesting one, and you mentioned AI, but even not AI, we had one case where the person had it had a CAT scan, and the CAT scan said probable TIA, all right, vascular event. The next day they sent him for MRI. The MRI said, ruled out the TIA, didn't happen. But the client called and said, hey, wait a minute, why aren't you debiting for the TIA? And those are the kinds of things that happen. If you're looking at the medical records, sequentially and having the ability to look at everything in the whole context. Yes, the medical record did say they had a TIA, but we didn't mark it because the next day they went with an MRI, which is more accurate than a CAT scan, and it ruled it out. But those are the kinds of things, and as Mike said, we're happy to talk to everyone, and we want to be transparent about not only why we feel the way we do, but also our performance. And there's lots of performance measures that are out there, and some of them are maligned, and we, as an industry, have not come to some great agreement. But I think folks like Rich, they're going to press us to say, how do you know that you're as good as you say you are? Or how do you convince us that you're as good as you say you are? And that kind of dialogue should be welcomed, and I'm thinking all of us on the panel welcome those kinds of discussions.
Yeah, of course. Feedback is always welcome.
Yeah. I will just add a line to what Vince just said about cholesterol, the importance of cholesterol, it being detected and taken care of. So some conditions are very good to have or good to know, not have, good to know. That you have those like hypertension, like obesity, like diabetes, like cholesterol, hyperlipidemia. Because these are highly modifiable disease condition, you can take care of this condition immediately. It doesn't need a whole lot. The intention, like I just mentioned, being compliant with your medication that has been advised to you, taking care of your fitness, working on to get your BMI reduced. These are easily modified. And once you are aware that you have these conditions, it's easy to put your, intention to bring those down, the levels down. So when you see those kinds of remarks in the medical records, it definitely helps us. Sometimes the doctor would say that he looks younger than the stated age. Sometimes they would say he looks older than the stated age. Those are like not direct communication to us about his health status, but it does give us an idea about how he is looking into his own health, what is he doing to maintain that kind of health status. So those are things that we definitely look into when given to us. They are not in black and white, but yes, you read between the lines.
Well, Moni, I have not been able to easily deal with my obesity, I'll tell you that.
I'll tell you how.
Thank you. So one of the things that we do is we will blend the life expectancy reports. And what we found is while there can be a lot of variability on any one individual, because you can have somebody get hit by a car, that's unpredictable, right? You could have somebody have a condition just developed that they didn't have, that the doctors didn't pick up, things like that. So those are the unpredictable. But what we found is, although there's a lot of variance on an individual basis, when we pool these into hundreds of different policies and we take a look at the cash flows based on all their data, then it has a lot more predictability. And that's how we manage the portfolios. We'll get into a little bit of that later. But the information that we get, although not perfect, is invaluable and a critical component of what we do. So thank you for all your hard work and always trying to improve and get better, because this is an extremely difficult task. And as you've rightly pointed out, even more difficult than what the life insurance companies are, which is binary yes and no, and then just some basic, kind of handicaps on the table ratings if there are impairments. We're going to switch to mortality trends, and then we can also hit a little bit of technology and industry trends as well. We'll start out with Vince. What are you seeing out there?
Okay, one back. This is, as a researcher, right, we're trying to explain what is happening in the world today. And this slide behind you is basically flu deaths in the United States. We're starting in 2016-17 flu season, all the way up to 22-23. We don't have 23-24. But the interesting thing there, because we want to use the most current data to try and figure out what's going on. And if you just look at flu deaths, you can see that they peak in 2017-18. And then all of a sudden, 2019 through 2022, they're non-existent just about, especially 2020 through 22. And of course, everybody knows why is that? COVID, right? Because all of a sudden, people just stopped dying of the flu and they died of COVID, right? No. That's not what really happened, and that's what confounds researchers. But what did happen was every hospital that had a COVID death got $3,900. So guess what? All these flu deaths turned into COVID deaths. So when somebody asks, hey, what's the impact of COVID on the population death, especially as it relates to our older population, it's not so cut and dry, is it? So those are the kind of challenges we face. And one of the challenges Rich gave us when we were preparing for this panel was, what's happening with mortality? Mortality just seems a little light. What's going on? Has COVID, pulled forward some mortality, like Zoom pulled forward all their demand, and now the stock was $500 and now it's $40 because there's no more demand. It all got used up. Well, so I took that question and we went to the next slide. And said, well, what is going on with mortality? And again, just to clear this slide, we're going to start out way over here. Maybe I'll stand up. Hey, what the heck? And be, I'm going to come right behind you, Mike. Please don't push me. We're going to start back in 2016, and we're going to go all the way to the end of 2023 on this slide. And I've got two things for you. One down here is mortality rate, and over here you can't see this. This is 0.02, and way down there at the end it's 0.01. So Rich is right. Mortality rates are going down, and this is our life settlement population at Predictive Resources. But what's also happening, which I was fascinated because I would have never guessed, this is our mortality multiplier. It's actually divided by 100 so that you could fit on the same slide. But a mortality multiplier, which was 7 back in the end of 2016, our population overall, that means everybody we had underwritten that was alive in 2017 in the beginning, the average multiplier was 7. Okay, that means they were 7 times as impaired as someone healthy for their age. Now, age has crept up over this time, but what's happened to the multiplier? It's gone down from 7 to about 3.6, all right? So Rich shouldn't expect more mortality. He's right that, hey, it's a little less, and the reason it's less is we've broadened the market. We're bringing in healthier lives. So overall, as long as our pricing is good and we're paying the right amount for these policies, we are going to see fewer mortalities and at a lower rate than we used to, and that's only because we should expect less mortality. Somebody who has a 7 times the rate of a healthy person is obviously going to die. You're going to get more deaths out of that population than the one that only has 3.5 times the amount of deaths as a normal person or a healthy person.
Quick question, and in reviewing for this panel, Taylor had sent me the link to last year's life expectancy panel, and I'd watched it, and I think it was you, Vince, that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you probably understand this stat, but it reminded me of a statistic that from 2010 to 2020 was the first time since we've been keeping records in the US that life expectancy actually went down on around a decade basis, which was, fascinating to me. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how that trend plays into?
Well, that's a tough one. And first of all, I'm amazed that somebody actually kept a copy of anything that I've produced in my life. But yes, this is again what we're trying, and what COVID has done, and to sort of put a bow around what I first said about the flu deaths and the COVID deaths. What COVID has done is it's reduced our ability to try and determine what is going on there, because it is true, since basically as long as we've been keeping track of human mortality has gone down and down and down and down. The last couple years, it hasn't gone down. Or we could be like Washington people, where a budget cut means that the rate of budget increase is lower. Same thing. Either the mortality rate has gone up or the rate of the decline in mortality has gone down as well. So we don't have enough data yet, but what I call a huge tailwind for this industry is if you just look at recent experience, you're seeing higher rates of mortality. Mortality isn't improving as much anymore, and principally I think that's related to obesity. The obesity crisis in our country, even though it's not ubiquitous in our population, which is higher educated and higher income, but it's still very, very much more so than it was, 20 years ago.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to talk about the mortality with cancer. And I was talking a few minutes before this session to a couple of people. And it's something diverging from what Vince said is, the mortality seems to be stable. But I'm trying to provide an outlook for the future of how the mortality is changing for the cancer. So these are some recent trends in cancer. The data is up to 2023, but they captured only up to 2020. And you'd see that the incidence on the left side of the chart is the incidence of cancer. So if you look from 2005 and onwards, kind of stable. Don't so much rely on the 2020 data because everything got reported pretty late. So due to COVID, several of those things. The interesting finding is you would see those blue line and the orange one and the pink one on the left this one, the mortality is going down with cancer. That's very true. And on this right side, it shows that if it was in 1995 and you had projected the same mortality going on, until 2020, how many cancer deaths have been averted due to newer therapies, newer medications? Go to my next slide. So I picked up this slide, and this is very interesting, which shows the survival gains that has happened in mortality in the last few decades. So the first blue one, the bar, it shows what has been happening since 1975 to 77. The dark blue one is 1995 to 97. And you would see a significant survival gain in 5-year survival rates being added, specifically for myeloma, which Vince, you spoke, the very recent one, but also prostate cancer, melanoma of skin. Overall, as a malignant melanoma, the mortality was lower, but the most gain has been in the metastatic melanoma, which is like a stage 4 disease. Just take 10 years past, the median overall survival used to be less than 10% in metastatic melanoma. And if now people respond to the medications, the 5-year survival rate is 82%. So it's a huge difference in that survival gain. Gains also made on the female breast cancer, colon, and these are almost twice than what you would have seen in the past. So definitely, mortality when it comes to cancer has been improving. One more slide, next. And this I picked up specifically for metastatic cancers. And you would see that these are talking of different types of medications when they came in and how that affected the mortality. So the very first blue ones are those cytotoxic medications, which we also commonly see as chemotherapy medications. And they were until the 2000. And from 2000, we saw targeted therapies, specifically targeting. Mortality started to improve. And what we are seeing now is the orange ones, immunotherapy, which started in 2015. And it's been doing wonders for a few of the cancers, specifically the most common ones. So if someone would have underwritten an LE in 2015, they would have not known what is the effect of this medication. Come 2020, you would have expected this person may not be on this medication, or we don't know when FDA would approve this medication and when this person will be put on this medication. And maybe if someone issued an LE at that point, maybe it could be very different what they would do it now. Because as I mentioned, the survival has improved from 10, almost 8-fold in metastatic melanoma alone. So these are some really good insights to see that how this all medications are coming. What's happening from 2020 to 2024 is now they are combining these medications. So immunotherapy plus targeted therapy. They are sequencing these medications. First they would give you target therapy, then immunotherapy. So I am not sure if we would get to the 100% survival gain, but definitely few cancers like leukemia, they became a chronic condition. Some of these cancers might see this. Not all, but a few of these.
And from kind of my observation, correct me if I'm wrong, what's happening with a lot of these mortality improvements, you guys had the very difficult job of not only trying to interpret the historical data, but trying to project forward.
Yes.
So you take these types of factors into consideration when you're trying to, wipe up your crystal ball and look in the future. So we know that that's a very difficult job.
Yeah.
Okay, this is my slide. Basically, it's just a carry forward to what Rahul has just said. And since it's difficult for me to look back and again, I will just start from what I have written down here. And yes, we would definitely like to know what's driving the improvement in the cancer survival scenario. So there has been a report that that says that there is a 33% drop since 1991, and the peak was in 1991, and then which kept going down every year since. And this article was from American Cancer Society and was published in 2020. So yes, there are reasons why this has happened, which I just summarized it somewhat. One is definitely the improved screening for early stage detection of cancers. we have made such advancement in science, in technology. When we are talking about technology, let's say that that it's easier now, or much improved now, for detection of early cancers. So as to speak, if I say there are advanced genomic studies, molecular studies that help to identify particular genes that might be in you. It could be hereditary or otherwise, but that definitely helps as a prophylaxis or a preventative way to prevent cancer from occurring. You must have heard about HPV vaccines, which are given prophylactically to young adults to prevent cervical cancers. You must have heard about hepatitis B vaccines that are given for prophylaxis for liver cancers. So these are some initial screening strategies, I would say, that helps in diagnosing or preventing the development of cancers. The other key factors that has happened over time is the development of newer, or let's say revolution that has happened in the treatment industry, like the initiation of immunotherapy, which is, immunotherapy is basically resetting the body's immune system to fight against the cancer cells. And there are ways how, I would like to bring an example, which is I'm sure everybody have, just like Rahul said about advanced melanoma. The advanced melanoma was plunging at 31.9% 5-year survival rate, and that was back in 2011. And then there was some checkpoint inhibitors called Opdivo, if you have heard about Keytruda, Yervoy. These are the newer immunotherapy that has come into use more currently, that has brought up the survival to even more than 77% on today's date. And this was basically because there are different types of inhibitors, checkpoint inhibitors, targeted therapies that has been employed to take care of these are newer developments, of course, and we being underwriters are constantly on a lookout of what could be the newer, or what is the newer thing in the market, that could improve the survivability of that particular condition. So it's not, so what I would like to emphasize is that the manual or the guideline that we have for our own companies, it's a living document. It's not written down in like, what do you say? It's not a permanent guideline. It keeps changing. These numbers keep changing all the time because of the newer advancement that is there, and that which we need to relook and update on every timely possible way. I could keep going on saying stuff about immunotherapy and chemotherapy, but let's not go into. But I would just like to put it out there that there are different types of immunotherapy, which is CAR T cell therapy, which is a very interesting newer development that has happened for cancer therapy, wherein the white blood cells, which are found inside the tumor, they are extracted out. They are developed in the laboratories, and they are energized or strengthened, so that they are pushed back into the patient, and these strengthened white blood cells now can fight more aggressively against the cancer cells. So it's interesting how they have developed. It's like engineering that has happened in the immune system or immune components of the body. So yeah.
I just wanted to add, on the part of the art, again, like this is science. So not everyone is benefiting from the immunotherapy. So we have to identify these individuals who may not even benefit from the immunotherapy. So in a year or 2 years, again, they might have a recurrence of their cancer, and they have not a complete response, or they just have a partial response, or they just are having a stable disease or no response. You can get these all 4 spectrums. So sometimes getting medical records for a lengthy period of time, seeing what could be those factors where we could say this person is not good, not having the benefit of immunotherapy. And again, to tomorrow if you say, oh, now why are you debating so much metastatic melanoma? Or why are you giving this kind of life expectancy on this one? Because you already said they are all living for a long time, but not everyone. You would still find a subset of those people who might not respond to
Yes.
these therapies, and you would see that, hey, we have changed a bit.
And it's your job to kind of separate that wheat from the chaff, right?
Yes.
I mean, medical improvements are a wonderful thing. They can cure ailments, but to my knowledge, there's nothing out there that's going to cure old age, unfortunately.
Yes.
Yeah, well, here's a quiz. 1995, what was the leading cause of death in the U.S.? Anyone? No one studies this stuff? Heart disease. Heart disease, number one, it was 50% higher, and I'm not a big, based on the COVID thing back here, I'm not big on national health statistics for cause of death, but they are indicative. So heart disease was 50% higher as a cause of death than with the second leading cause, which was, you just talked about it, cancer, right? Okay. So over the period of time from 1995, heart disease has been reduced to the point where heart disease and cancer are pretty much even now. So that's medical advances. But why is it important for us? Because the research from 1995 to 2005, overwhelming majority of the research was heart disease, okay? And what happened was heart disease was reduced as a leading cause of death. What was the leading, and still is the leading research topic now? Cancer. So we have to not only look at where we are with cancer, but know that the research focus of the whole country is on cancer now. So when we're looking at a case, we can't look at just the statistics, and I know that's blasphemy for an actuary to say. We have to assume that these cancer improvements are going to just keep coming and coming, because that is where the research is focused.
And that's also an aside, but also a very profitable business. Mike, can you talk about any mortality trends? Or I know technology was one of the things you wanted to touch on as well, and then maybe we'll have time for a question or two.
With respect to mortality trends, I mean, I guess I'd speak more from a business sense and say that, the common theme was mortality improvement here. And for the investors in the room, that is not unexpected for any of us. We were prepared for it. We were constantly evaluating our processes and procedures. As Moni said, an underwriting manual is a living document. Our clients that are on the investment side also account for that. Most of the pricing and valuation models in this business build in mortality improvement factors to account for that fact. So the fact that mortality is improving does not have a negative impact on the performance of the asset class, if you will. It really is something that has been, accounted for and planned for in the process. So just wanted to throw in some kind of business points there for the business.
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent point. And I think that is the key is you guys are on it, and that information is helpful for us because we can bake that into our financial models. Good point, Mike. You want to hit technology trends real quick, and then we'll open up for a question?
For me, one of the biggest challenges that we face as an industry is really the access and the gathering of information with respect to these insured lives. We've seen a lot of evolution in the way that information's gathered over the last 20 years. The healthcare system is very fragmented, if you will, and so it has presented a lot of challenges. As we aim to get more efficient, to be more automated in what we do, to employ, artificial intelligence and all of these new, trends and buzzwords that people want to talk about, garbage in equals garbage out. So the access to the information in a timely manner is one of the biggest both barriers, but also getting past it, probably changes that will have a meaningful impact on this business, both the speed with which transactions happen, but also the quality of the inputs that all of the underwriters are receiving. The federal government will probably in an inefficient way eventually get to centralizing that information. They're making strides in doing so with the establishment of qualified health information networks and things along those lines that will allow for data sharing. Hopefully that improves the speed with which we receive the inputs. It helps people on the transactional side, decrease the timeline, which is a mitigating factor to getting transactions done, and it provides investors with, closer access to the information that drives one of the predominant variables in their, in managing their longevity risk.
So you guys were good, definitely getting better, and this will accelerate that learning curve and access to data, information, feedback loop, and your ability to assess and project. And that's not just in the life expectancy world, that's all over, but it's good to know that it will have an impact here too. We're just about at time, but if we have a question or two.
So do 100% of the policies in your fund go through this group for underwriting?
I think there's 8 life expectancy underwriters that are active in the market today. This represents 4 of them.
And what percentage of do all your policies go through one of those 8?
Correct, they all do. We typically get 2, and then we blend them because sometimes you get variable information. So our standard is we get 2, we blend the curves, and then we blend the entire portfolio to try to figure out what our cash flows are.
There are lots of changes constantly, factors are changing. Would you say over the last 5 years you've gotten better, more accurate predictions, or you're just constantly just trying to deal with something that's not unmanageable in terms of the fact of all the data to make these decisions, buy or sell these policies?
So the question is what about the variability? You have new data that comes in. How does that impact your projections on these for longevity? Does it move around rapidly, maybe like the stock market, or is it something that is more of a slow trend movement? What are you guys seeing?
I see it as a slow trend. Generally, when you look at research studies, credible research studies, if we are looking in 2024, the data would be up to 2020. It won't be up to 2020 or 2021. So yes, there is a slow change. You don't change drastically by just looking at one study where you might say whether it's credible or not, how many people are involved in that study, how do you assess the quality of the study, and then you decide it. So there is a slow change, but yes, you also attend these kind of symposiums, conferences, talk to several people within your field. You talk to clinicians. You remain observant what's happening in this society and kind of gauge it to a very good extent through your professional judgment that, yes, for this specific thing, maybe the mortality would improve a little bit. So you kind of build that while you are doing this. This is all which goes all through every underwriter's mind when he's doing each of those cases.
To answer your question quickly, it has improved, and the reasons are twofold. Technological improvements have allowed us to be a lot more introspective with respect to our data. The ability to structure data, from medical records allows us to analyze that more effectively. And then 2, and Vince can probably speak to that, is the longer your tenure in the business, the more the duration on the lives that you've underwritten, you can really understand the efficacy of your approach. So if you underwrite 10,000 lives today, and the average life expectancy is 120 years, and you look at that next year, you haven't experienced a lot of deaths. There's going to be a lot of volatility there. However, the longer you've been in business, the more lives you've underwritten, the more duration you have, the more you can evaluate the efficacy of your approach.
Yeah. We look at the data twice a year, at least twice a year, to see if there are any material changes and if we went back and measured we measure our accuracy. If we measure our accuracy from the beginning of time using what we knew back then or what we knew when we underwrote, we have a certain level, and the level of accuracy is much higher given all the things we've learned and how we've changed our methodologies, our tables, and things like that. And we feel it's important to properly reflect everything we know about the data we see rather than sit and wait 5 years and say, oh, geez, let's take another look then. We want to look at it so that we can make these changes and be as accurate as possible in real time.
Well, thank you so much for joining. We're going to jump to our next panel, but these professionals will be available at break for additional questions.